can do it. So now we come to our current talk. So this talk is from Leif Teves. Leif Teves is a German author who wrote a book which is called Alternatives. It's about people which go in different directions of the political spectrum. So people which are going into the direction of the Islamic State, people go into the direction of right populism, right-wingers. So it's a very interesting book, and so I talked with him, and so we pre-recorded this talk because unfortunately he can't be here today live. And this interview will show you right now. The book Alternatives is a high recommendation from me, so I read it, and it's a really very, very interesting book. And the most interesting part is that actually Leif Teves went into the AfD, so the German right-wing party, and like talked with the people, worked with the people to get a feeling on how they work. So there's one small spoiler I'll give. So by now he's now doing is working actively against right-wingers and helping to stop getting this stuff more popular. So now I wish you have a lot of fun with this interview. Well, so start the movie.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, would you just like to start with the reading straight away? Yes, I can do that. Maybe a few introductory warnings. The book is broadly in the crime novel category. It's called noir, which is a rather special genre, which is not about a whodunit and who is the corpse. It's more about how did the actions come about? Why do people act in this way? What happened to them? And the murders that happen, well, they happen. They are the surroundings, but it's the social context, really. That's one thing I'd like to say. What I like about noir, the film, the noirs as well, it's the social context in which actions happen and which characters act is always relevant there. It's not necessarily a social critique, but it's not a social scientific thing, but the social context has a role, and that's how it was with all my previous books. And this book's called Alternatives. For that, I took a very specific context in which, interestingly, we still are. When I wrote this, I thought this will be over soon, but that wasn't the case. And this is about the appearance of a right-wing populist party, which naturally doesn't have the name in the book that than the one that you know in Germany, which is Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany. I chose alternatives in the plural because I think that nothing is without alternative, and there is never the alternative either. There are always several ones. That's at the heart of the story, and basically it's about a protagonist who is somehow sucked into this right-wing populist party. I was thinking about the name for a long time, so I call them the Better Germans, Die Besseren Deutschen. DBD is the German abbreviation, and if you say that quickly, you get something which is close to the German word for fool, Depp. I have an investigator, a police investigator, Mr. Berg, who is looking at an accident which turns out to be a murder. And for this one scene, I picked a scene for the PrivacyWeek 2020, where investigator T.I. Berg is sitting with a colleague in the police headquarters, and it's about this right-wing populist party followers within the police force. And I have to add, this was published in 2017. I wrote it about in early 2017, so that's 3.5 years ago or something. So the fact that I thought of this, and that now we have a very current debate, this is very much debated at the moment. How many right-wing populists do we have in the police force? So I thought this is a very apt thing to choose. I thought of it at the time, but clearly it wasn't too much of an invention. Right. So you're looking for new recruits? Carl greeted him. Berg grinned sheepishly and went to the conference table and dropped into one of the chairs. The police president sat opposite of Berg. Okay, put it differently. The new police student seems to consider himself very important. Yeah, well, Werner disappeared, so I thought, yeah, not a bad idea. You have access to the base. Did you go to the lab? Well, the technologists are not certain. There was brake liquid in the system, so he could have braked, but there were no traces on the street. But that's not why you're here, or is it? Asked the police president. No, it's because, well, when you need to be sensitive, I'd like to get your advice. Huh, said the police president. If only you did it more often. Now it's getting political. Well, Berg explained the situation. On the one hand, there was a left-wing radical graffiti person he had to follow that might actually also sabotage brakes. And then there was this new party. The Better Germans. Yeah. Maybe Berg said he may have to investigate them as well. Carl let Berg finish. Yes, that is kind of delicate. Yes, it is. Well, it's even more delicate. Even more. The police president leaned back and drummed on the table plate using his fingers. Sadly, within the police, we have a few friends of this party. Berg laughed. Yeah, well, I know that. The police student already told me that. The things that get said in the canteen, well, the one thing is the operative base. I can understand that some of the colleagues on the street would like to have easier solutions. And what's the other thing, asked Berg? Well, the other thing is that the leading people, even a prosecutor sometimes. Berg said, you'd know some of these people? Even worse. Worse? Carl, what are you going to tell me? The police president looked at the ceiling and sighed. My successor. What? Berg jumped up. Your successor too? Well, he's one of the candidates. This decision hasn't been made yet. Berg paced up and down the office. One of my potential new superiors is a Nazi. Well, what can I say? One of the candidates is a party member. Just rumors, I think. But then the minister surely will have a reason not to appoint him. Well, maybe it depends on how things stand after the election. Why? Berg banged the table again. Nazi is Nazi and remains Nazi, if only it were that simple. If the minister does not appoint him and only slightly refers to his party membership as a reason, then he will be sued immediately. They will say he's trying to limit his professional options due to his convictions. And there have been cases, and the people are just being rehabilitated elsewhere. Well, this only surely will be decided in the back rooms. Professional ability never was a reason, was it? Thank you. Well, never mind. I just want a good transition in my last few days. You can believe me. this candidate I like no more than my wife likes a disturbance at home. Well, so if this nameless candidate will hear of my investigations, will they immediately go after me? Well, the police president continued, if I tell you who it is, what would that help you? Well, at least I have a face. If perhaps someone will shoot at me from the background. Berg hesitated before he continued, oh, what were you thinking? The drumming on the table stopped. Well, put it like this. If during your investigations you get certain information about this candidate that could lower his chances to become my successor, then that might be helpful to both of us. Now Berg smiled. Yes, keep saying if. I hope so. The fingers of the police president started drumming on the table again. It's the group leader, SD4, in Wiesbaden. Berg raised his eyebrows. How fitting. State protection, Federal Criminal Police Force. He is far away of my small circle, is he? How wrong he would be, Berg didn't know at the time. So that was the cliffhanger, and we were just entering the story. Of course, it continues. Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think this is a very, very gripping story. So everyone that wants to read it, I strongly recommend your book. But just about the story before, you did say that there are that you did extensive research that went beyond what people might imagine an author's research to be, and where that author would go to. Would you like to talk about that a little?
Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about this.
Also der sich davon angesprochen ist von und den habe ich dann also schon Zeitungsfigur und dann wird ja also das erste Mal so Parteitreffen, habe jetzt ausgemalt, so Hinterzimmer.
Okay, so you talked about how he went into this. Sorry, we had just a communication problem between the translators, I think. So what they talked about in this like small restaurant, and I thought, you just follow this up. You don't know any Nazis. So how can I find them? So it's all fantasy. So I thought, no, this can't be. So I can't write this book and this story, which should have some hints of reality at least, if I haven't been there. So I said, okay, well then you have to go there. So internet. So. And then I thought up a name and went on the internet, got to the AFD and website and downloaded the agreement. Yeah, and so I became a member. And then suddenly, at some point, I got an email back which said, yeah, okay, so we got your application. But there's like an interview before, so I panicked immediately. So I didn't want to give them my telephone number, so I bought a new prepaid card and sent this new telephone number. And so then I also always had my like AFD telephone, and because I never knew when they will call. So and then they called on a Sunday and talked half an hour. 3/4 of an hour, like an introduction interviews, like standard stuff at the beginning, and then he wanted to know why I want to enter this party, and of course I thought about so like a story, what I can do. So so I made it pretty simple in general. I just tried to enter my character in the book, but which I was actually doing anyway, thinking in this character, and now I like I just described this character and his views, and there's this Thomas character. I just played my role there. And then, so this is then passed forward to the next group and from the like more federal stuff, and then they tell you if it's okay or not, and they don't accept everyone, and they really throw people out. So they don't like take people from other parties which just were like, yeah, okay, well. And then there was like a get an ID, like a membership ID. Sorry, I just don't have it with me. And then I got a newsletter. So 3 quarters before the election in 2017, I could like enter different like working groups for the election, for the federal election in Germany. And of course I like checked all of them and said that I'm interested in all of this. And then I got the first email, invitation for this meeting, for the special interest group, blah blah blah. And then I went there, and it was like a back room in a well-known restaurant. So there was like a U-shaped table, and it was very like fine, and but it was really like I imagined those people, a bit worse even, but it was really like that. So like in the back room of a good restaurant, and then I was there, and I've went there several times, and later, like on local, when they created new party chapters and like barbecues, just standard meetings until April 2017. I was in Cologne at the federal party's like party day, and that was like really. So that was after that I didn't believe in anything anymore. So whatever, yeah. And this is where I got the input for my characters in the book. And I also have like a Word, I still have a Word document from my book with a lot of like quotes from my characters in my book. And also I wrote comments for them. So who were the sources? So where did I hear these things, so that I have like proof what I heard. That was very intense time where I learned a lot. Okay, yeah, that's really sounds So you have my condolences. Yeah. So I talked about in the PrivacyWeek team. I've looked for questions which they would ask you, and 2 of them were stuff you already mentioned. So the first is, what kind of people do you actually meet there? So because this whole topic of talking to right-wingers, the more you go to the left, it's people will tell you, you can't tell with them, you can't talk with them, those are like, you just don't want to, etc. So, but many of the questions I collected were, so what kind of people are those? Do they actually believe this stuff? That's a very good question, really. Because on all those meetings, I met not one of those so-called left behinds. So maybe they have them from the voters, but within the party, these are like middle class, economically stable people, like shopkeepers. Actually, a lot of policemen, pilots, just people in their pension, lawyers, students. So they have been. I've got to know young people as well. So, but none of them I got to know. But okay, no, one. So one of them was unemployed, but 80 to 90% of those people were like, they have great jobs, they have stable lives. No one ever took anything from them ever. So none of them really suffered except for brain damage. But yeah. And second question, yeah, they actually believe what they're saying. So you're sitting there and think, eh? Are you really saying that? And they believe it, yeah. So they live on the one side in the same like real world as we do, and they go to the same shops, but in their brains, they live in a completely different world. So like really totally different. And that was something that like really I was really shocked about that. So I was really like, I thought like, how can you actually believe that? That can't possibly exist. So, and the last question, no, you can't talk to them. So, but another question for that, which was given. So, uh, are there, have there been things like or experiences which were so absurd that you thought no one is actually going to believe them, and so you don't put them into your book? Well, what was very absurd, or like maybe the culmination of well, hatred against humans, that was when one guy from there with a special position, whom I met in Cologne, and said, hey, yeah, like a big member forum, and we talked and all, and there was this meeting, and there was some days after the terror attacks in Stockholm, where just this crazy guy went into pedestrians with a WLKW, and I talked to them at this at this meeting, and there was a discussion about Hauke Petri, former leader, and this you see this discussion with Petri, so this is that's it costs voters votes, and so what do you think about it? And he said, I said that's with Petri, this will be over soon, and after Stockholm we need 2 or 3 more terror attacks, and then we've won. And I stood there, and I was literally like, I had no idea what to say. I had nothing to say. The people is actually, he worked at a university as a, well, he has a PhD in economics, and the only thing he says about this attack on Stockholm, he said, we need more of those because that is mobilizing our voters. So that was really, I was really like speechless. I couldn't say anything. I mean, I had to not say anything a lot of times, but that was really the one where I was like totally, yeah. I was also speechless for now. This is also something you're talking about in your book. So this possibility that terror attacks actually don't come always from the other side. Oh no. And one more question, which is about this. So this is like people who are well off, and the example you brought right now from the university lecturer. So these are like educated people who, in general, know what they are doing. So, did you find out why those people work so much against like their own interests actually? So if it's of course about the voters, but this question, do they believe this? So why? So I still don't get it. Why people be that way? Yeah, exactly. So. But I also asked this question. I sat there in the round with all the people and barbecue stuff, informal meetings, and I looked at those people and thought like, okay, none of you has any problems. What's your problem? Yeah? Who of those like asylum seekers and refugees actually take 1 cent from you? None of them. And I looked at them and was like, all of them like they are there. 5 hours in like a pair therapy, and the problems fixed. My thesis is they were all unhappy men. All unhappy men who had no sex anymore. So that's my personal thesis and opinion on that. So, but it's not just men in the party. Yeah, but most of them. Yeah, but yeah, let's say 90% men. And those women I've seen who've been always also there actually have been like the wives of the guys there, and if I had been their husband, I would have been unhappy too. But whatever. So that's just yeah. That's what I think about it. My hypothesis. They're not there. I also have some very heavy hypothesis about this. Let's say about that. So that was my hypothesis, which I really just came to my mind, and I thought about it. It's like, yeah. So they're all unhappy. But something else which I realized is that those in the party, there are a lot of people who would like to be important. So you have a lot of like elbow movement there, and so on. The third, yeah, so like very hierarchical stuff, and like the one who, yeah, so all of them, so not they're really like playing very important. So it's just people who want to be important. You looked at those, and you knew that in the earlier times they just so the people who they would have become janitors or someone who would like to be important, or because they believe that it's just a kind of, you have to be important to be someone. Okay. I think I can like grasp this thought. I think this is a hypothesis you can continue.
Yeah, I'm not going to work on the other thesis though. Well, maybe not in this live stream. Yeah, but actually I do believe that it would be interesting to put a bit more thought into this. Going back to your first hypothesis, a history teacher of mine had similar thoughts about all the large military leaders in history. His reasoning was that the people that have happy families at home and children and whatever, they would know who would be affected first, who would be hit first if there were attacks, if there was war. So they would more rarely get the idea of starting a thing like this. So that thought too, to me, makes a lot of sense and should be followed. Yeah. I believe the literature is, of course, full of deliberations, what these people are like that become members that vote for populists like that. But that wasn't my approach to verify whether that is the case. I just wanted to see and smell and hear them and use them for my story. Another question that I received ahead of this talk, I would like this question too. Does it actually rub off? Or how much time did you need to, quote, spend with normal people to compensate for being with these people there? Well, when I came back from a meeting like this, it took me a whole evening to wind down. And the best thing to do that, hang on, if I poured down brown convictions with brown liquid, that helped. It did rub off in the sense that when I had finished my book and said, okay, well, this was research, I can now leave it behind. It didn't quite, I couldn't leave it behind. It didn't leave me alone. And since then, I have become much more active politically than I had been. So now in this region, I have joined a group that goes to anti-alternative for Germany demos. So that was new. And it just didn't leave me because I did see a threat back then and I still see it now. So I thought, okay, I can now use this for literary work. I have done something, but to actually go out on the streets, that was something different. And that kind of activity was spurred by that experience. And it hasn't left me alone since then. So you still have the urge to actually work against those tendencies. I have been radicalized to some extent. I have become more radical, yes. Yes, I can understand that pretty well. Also, even if I wouldn't dare to, as a woman particularly, I probably would be more conspicuous as a woman. I don't know if I would dare to take that route, but I have been told several times you cannot buy courage. Yeah, I didn't find it overly courageous. I didn't go down to the snake pits. I just had to go and be quiet, basically. What I did find interesting was that I had a much more intense mental connection to these ideologies. I dealt with these mentally much more, and that was quite an effort and quite a strain to accept the fact that such idiots do exist. They exist, and if you know them, and if you can look into their eyes and know their names, and you've had a beer with them, then the world looks a bit more cruel somehow. The world then looks like as if you're like a U-shaped table in the back room of a restaurant or something. Yeah. Did you find out in any way what, well, about the actual driving force that unifies all these people? We did talk about your two hypotheses. Are there any more? Well, that was quite a daring hypothesis, but my basic hypothesis is that the potential for such a right-wing populist movement did always exist. Whether it was the Republikaner Party in the 80s and 90s, or the DVU later, or whether the potential was there all the time in society, in German society, to like these things. That potential was there. And the Alternative for Germany they did two things right. One of these was a present. That was in 2015 when the refugees came. And the other thing that they did right was the internet. Alternative for Germany, I believe, still is the party with the most followers on Facebook. They play the internet like no one else. Schönhuber, the Republikaner politician, bought himself into a newspaper, Münchner Merkur, and that was pretty good, but much more expensive. But then just sitting a few people down in the basement and let them play the internet, and they do that so skillfully. They offer workshops, internal workshops for Photoshop within the party to produce meme images, and they have their internet trolls and they play that perfectly. And these two things led to this fuse that had been there all the time being lit. And so the internet, which they recognized very cleverly, and that was the early autumn 2015. Otherwise, I don't believe that this is actually a new trend. The potential has always been there. Yeah. I fear that you are right. And that is a bit of a recap that also applies to what you said at the beginning. Sometimes I would have preferred to be wrong or just to have invented something, but yeah, Yeah. Well, since you were talking about the internal trainings, are there real training programs, things where perhaps convictions are being formed, and is that practiced? I didn't take part in any of these, but I do know that actually there are courses, rhetoric courses. How do I talk with my friends, with my acquaintances? How do I find the right arguments? So language courses, they exist. And I heard about the Photoshop workshop. Otherwise, they have a whole range of trainings, but I don't know any details about what they are about and how it takes place. I didn't dare to go there. Yeah. And regarding language, do they also have certain taboos that they do not talk about? Well, what do you mean by taboo issues? I don't know which topics are not discussed, but because these things are not discussed, but I know that they actually have two big enemies. One of these are the foreigners, wherever they may come from, and the others are the left-green contagious people. That's what they are really allergic to. I wouldn't have thought that, I have to say. I heard Bernd Höcke. He was taking part in the Bavarian regional election campaign. So he was good. I was in the room, Björn Höcke, and I was sweating and will I be found out? And then Björn Höcke came in. And that was really, just like it was a movie, a sensational appearance. Okay, he's a teacher, he has learned how to speak, but at least a third of his speech was spent by raging about those people outside, the counter demonstration outside. And that brought me to say, yes, well, at the next counter demo, I will be out there, because that gets on their nerves. That really gets on their nerves. The more people are out there and scream, the more they are annoyed. On the one hand, of course, it will strengthen, solidify their convictions, but on the other, I don't care. I want them to be annoyed, and that works. Yeah, I can really imagine that, yeah. Okay, I'm going back to my list of questions that I collected. One question that I found interesting and that has got me thinking too now, do you see a way of reconnecting to people that have been sucked into this right-wing populist thinking? I think you have to differentiate those that are in the party. Well, from the beginning, there were internal struggles. When Lucke was expelled, the more conservative founder, then came Petri, who was more to the right, and then she was expelled, and then there came the others. So this party has always moved to the left, to the right, of course. And among the delegates, this was palpable. So these new leaders, on the first shift to the right, there was a 2/3, 1/3 split in the vote for the new leaders. And I then observed how the manifesto was formed, and my sense still was that a third wanted a different policy. They were not so much keen on these right nationalist thinking. They wanted something different. And these are then, of course, automatically displaced, because as the party drifts towards the right, and you won't get them back. You will never get them back. But the other thing is the voters, the followers, those that say, well, yeah, they're right there. We can't continue like this. And I have had conversations with the only person I knew and still know when who said late at night, "Oh, the poor pensioners, they have to collect bottles now," and there's others who will have everything handed to them on the plate. And I had a serious conversation with them, and then the response was, "Yeah, actually, you're right." So those that aren't spending a lot of time thinking, that just say, "Well, yeah, these people are correct in some way," you could get those back and tell them, "Come on, don't let yourself be fooled like this." And I have a hope there. And the voter potential could be reduced. And I think that is possible. Those that are really in the party and hardcore members and are marching on, they are probably lost. But let me say, today, if they have 15% now, that will be a lot. A third will be gone through the hardcore changes. So that's 10%. And if you get a third of those, yeah, well, then that is not really important anymore. Well, your word in whoever's ear. Yeah, well, I admit I'm being optimistic here because I want to believe that, but that's my experience was not everyone here is a Nazi. That is true. That's what they say, and that is true. But there's quite a lot of them. You did say in your book that you did not just deal with Nazis in your book, but also with the opposition, with the left-green contaminated do-gooders, but also with people that go to Islamic State, which is another character in your book. And I have one question that I received ahead of this talk. There are many in Germany, many young people, men as well as women, who are attracted by the Islamic State. Do you have an explanation for that? Well, again, there have been books about this, and clever people have analyzed this. But what I have found for that, on that, is, well, let me say, in principle, the motivation is much like those people that vote for the alternative for Germany. These are people with a very simplified worldview, or people that want a very simplified worldview so that they can get along in this world of ours today. It's always about having to endure as little complexity as possible, because complexity is something you have to deal with. There's always a plus as well as a minus. And if I want a simple worldview and a simple idea of humans, then I will either become an Islamic State terrorist or I vote for the alternative for Germany. And in between, there is not much left. That basically is the similarity between these. Okay? Daring hypothesis.
So I just muted myself because I had to laugh a bit. Yeah, but I mean, that's, yeah, this idea, yeah, we can just leave it at that for further investigation, but it sounds plausible. I think this, in this world getting more complex all the time, on the one side through digitalization, internet and stuff like that, and on the other side about just global developments and everything is connected with everything. And this saying that, so if there's a bag of rice falling over in China, we don't care, it just isn't valid anymore, because sooner or later it will now affect us. And I think many people just are like, well, they don't understand. It's too much for them to take in, so, and they think, so I don't want to think about that anymore. And so this desire can get very high. Yeah, I mean, since the beginning of our society, it's like, so what did the churches do differently, instead of just reducing complexity to this is like that because of why? So it's just, we have a simple world, and why did my house burn down? Well, because God wanted it. Okay, well then, yeah. And yeah, so it's just easier. So this desire for easy and simple explanation have been there since all the time, and this is how it like manifests today, I think. So, well, looking into history, it's about like opium for the people and like bread and games. Yeah. So this is nothing new, but this is just like how it manifests today, I think. One very nice question I just kept until the end. So if I'm married, well, are you married? No longer. Did it have? No, but it didn't have anything to do with the AFT party. Yeah, but with the. Yeah, we'll cut that out, right? Yeah. I'll just ask the Regie. Okay, but back to the question for the end. Has there been anything during this time with the AFD which you went through, which were actually positive, even though you actually didn't think like, or even if you didn't want to accept that it's positive? Well, I have only one scene I remember where I think about, there's still people who think about. It was when they, created a new local group, and were like 40 people, and they discussed about Bernd Höcke. Is it bad? Is he bad or good for the AfD? Should he be in or out? And it just 50% pro Höcke, 60%, 50% against. So it was like And at the end of this talk, at the end of this row, there sat a very old man, and suddenly tapped with his, he tapped on the ground and said, "I went to school under Adolf Hitler." And as he said, he knows what can come from this, and this Höcke is dangerous. And when he stays in the party, he will go. So this old man will go. And he said, this is something he didn't want when he entered the party, because he knows what can come from this. And that was where I thought, look at it. So there was one people who actually thought about it. So when they're now saying we're all not Nazis, but he knows what this old man was like. He saw the danger, what can come from it. And that was something I thought was very inspiring and impressive, actually. Well, having to look at the time, I would let that as a final image. Do you have anything you would like to tell our viewers at the Privacy Week? Buy this book, of course. Yeah, I can hold it into the camera. Or I think I don't have a copyright here. Well. I said at the beginning that I don't write books which just point fingers, but I really want, especially with this book, to show that you can have different opinions and you have to think about your opinions. So I don't have any pure good or evil in this book. My characters don't work like that. Even my antagonists, also those have human traits. I just invented them, but still he's a human, so he has to have human traits. So that you see that's what it's about for me. It's a book that doesn't say it's black or white. It's either a colorful book or a gray book, however you want to define it. And that is what I wanted to show. And this is important. I think this is important. And I think we all we all can decide ourselves in which direction we want to lead our lives. Every morning, every day, we have to choose. Well, thanks a lot for taking time. Yeah, thanks. Was very nice. Cool. Well, and then now we go back to the rest of the program of the Privacy Week 2020. Thanks and goodbye.